Welcome to the Lectric Service Center. Today, we'll be showing you how to replace the wiring harness on your Lectric XPeak 2. Before we begin, you'll need to make sure you have some tools ready to go. You will need a Phillips head screwdriver, flush cutters, and zip ties. Before we begin, make sure you remove the battery from your XPeak 2. Not only will this ensure that there is no current running through your bike as you work on it, but also, in order to remove the wiring harness, the battery will need to be out of the bike. Next, you will find cable wrapping on all the cables coming from the front of the handlebars. Unwrap all of the cables and set the cable wrapping aside. Make sure to remember how these cables are wrapped. This will make the rewrapping process a bit easier. In order to reach the wiring harness, you will need to remove the battery plate from the inside of the frame of the bike. To remove the plate, you'll need to unscrew the 8 screws holding it in place, 4 on top and 4 on bottom. It is very important that you do not lose these screws after you remove them. Holding the battery plate in place are 2 flathead screws and 2 button head screws on both the top and the bottom of the plate. Go ahead and remove all 8 of those screws. Now, remove the key from the bike. If you do not remove the key, you will not be able to remove the battery plate. Now, you'll need to pop the battery plate out of place. To do this, push up on the battery plate where the key cylinder rests. Then pull the bottom of the plate out of the frame of the bike. Do this by grabbing the part of the plate with the battery prongs on it. There are a few things you'll need to do in order to pull the battery plate completely out of the frame of the bike. Down onto the bottom portion of the battery plate, there are cables that connect the controller. These will need to be unplugged. Go ahead and unplug those cables. The shorter of the 2 cables might be tricky to unplug. We find it easiest to press the plug up against the inside of the frame, then pull the plugs apart. Now, the second step to removing the battery plate is to disconnect the key cylinder from the top of the plate. If you do not remove the key cylinder, the plate will get stuck inside of the frame of the bike. To disconnect the key cylinder from the plate, use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove the 2 screws from the underside of the top of the plate. Now you'll be able to pull the plate fully out of the frame of the bike. If it didn't come out while pulling the plate out, go ahead and remove the key cylinder from the frame of the bike. In order to unplug the wiring harness, you will need to pull the controller out of the frame of the bike. However, in order to pull the controller out from the bike, you will need to unplug the motor cable so that there's enough slack to actually pull the controller out. Down on the non-drive side chainstay, you will see 2 cables. The cable with the silver ring on the plug is the motor cable. Snip the zip ties holding the cables to the chainstay. To unplug the motor cable, unscrew the silver ring and pull the plugs apart. Now you can pull the controller out of the frame of the bike. There are multiple cables coming from the controller. The one you are looking for is the thickest of the cables with the largest plug. Find that cable and pull the plugs apart. Out of the front of the handlebars, you will see 5 quick plugs. Unplug all 5 of these quick plugs. There's one more quick plug further down. Make sure to unplug this as well. On the non-drive side of the bike, there is a hole in the frame with 3 cables coming out of it. The wiring harness is the cable with the 5 unplugged quick plugs on the other end. You will be pulling this cable all the way through the bike. Make sure you are pulling the correct cable. Now we will be installing the new wiring harness. Plug all the quick plugs from the new wiring harness to the corresponding quick plugs coming from the front of the handlebars. Find the other end of the new wiring harness and feed it through the hole on the non-drive side of the bike. Feed the cable all the way through the hole until the amount of slack roughly matches the amount of slack on the other cables on the front of the bike. Down at the controller, plug the end of the wiring harness into its corresponding quick plug. Now insert the controller back into the frame of the bike, making sure that the end of the controller with the cables coming out of it is facing towards the back of the bike. Grab the key cylinder and insert it back through the key cylinder hole. making sure that the locking pin on the bottom of the key cylinder is facing the back of the bike. We will now be installing the battery plate back into the frame of the bike. Press the battery locking button in and push the top of the battery plate through the battery slot. When pushing the battery plate into place, make sure that the locking pin on the key cylinder ends up through the locking hole on the top of the battery plate. Now, before moving on, you can lock the key cylinder into place by screwing in its mounting screws with a Phillips head screwdriver. Down at the controller, you will need to re-plug in the yellow plugs that you unplugged earlier. Plug those two plugs back into their corresponding plugs. Once those plugs have been plugged in, you can push the battery plate fully into place. When pushing the plate back into place, line the battery locking button up with the battery locking buttonhole. When pushing the battery plate into place, make sure the cables are tucked properly under the battery plate so that the battery plate will sit flush inside of the frame of the bike. Now you will need to secure the plate into place. Before you start that, make sure you are familiar with which screws go where. There are 8 screws, 4 flathead screws, and 4 buttonhead screws. 2 flathead screws and 2 buttonhead screws are to be screwed in to both the top and the bottom of the battery plate. We will start with the bottom plate. You will screw the buttonhead screws into the lowest holes on the battery plate. Then you'll screw the flathead screws into the holes that are closer to the front of the bike. The process will be reversed for the top of the battery plate. You will screw the buttonhead screws into the holes closest to the front of the bike and screw the flathead screws into the holes closer to the rear of the bike. To finish up this process, you will simply want to rewrap the cables in the front of the bike. If you need, push the wiring harness cable a bit more into the frame of the bike. Now, down at the back of the bike, you will need to re-plug in the motor cable. Do this by lighting up the 2 plugs, then screwing in the silver ring until you are unable to unplug the cables when pulling the 2 ends. Then, zip tie the 2 cables to the designated cable bosses. Use an extra zip tie to clean up the cables coming from the bottom of the bike if you would like. Don't forget to snip the excess. Finally, insert the battery back into your XPeak and turn it on to make sure that everything is plugged in correctly. If you have questions about this process, please feel free to reach out to our customer support team at contact@lectricebikes.com or give us a call at 602-715-0907. Thanks for watching.